Hi everybody, this is Prhine. I wanted to make an addendum to my original post, which was in response to PPSIMMONS, Did Jesus Give Us the Name of the Antichrist? I wanted to provide a little bit of clarity and direction for some of the for anybody who's listened to my video before. I wanted to give them scripture. I wanted to let them know that this isn't something I just thought up, and that it's actually from an author which I read, enjoy, and trust wholeheartedly. He's a Messianic Jew. His name is Dr. Arnold G. Fruchtenbaum, and there's two books in which I get my information from. One of them is Messianic Christology, and the other is The Footsteps of the Messiah. Both are amazing books, and I would highly suggest getting them if you have any interest in wanting to know anything about the Antichrist, the end times, talk about clear. This is perfectly crystal, folks. First, what I'm going to read is the seed of a woman, which is Genesis 3:15. I'm just going to read straight from the book and share some of this with you. It says, Messianic prophecy begins as early as the 3rd chapter of the book of Genesis. It is no surprise that the very first Messianic prophecy should occur within the context of the fall. If sin had not entered the world, there would not have been a need for a redeeming Messiah. After the fall, God curses the serpent who had caused the fall, and declares enmity between the serpent and womanhood. This enmity is to extend to the seed of the woman and the seed of the serpent. The seed of the woman refers to Christ, the Messiah, and the seed of the serpent will be the Antichrist, a study which he goes into further detail later on in his book in one of his appendixes, and I'll cover a little bit of that as well. First, the prophecy. This, the first messianic prophecy, declares that the Messiah's descent or genealogy will be reckoned after a woman, not a man. This immediately runs contrary to the biblical norm. There are many genealogies in Scripture, beginning with the earliest in Genesis 5 and 10, through the first 9 chapters of 1 Chronicles to Matthew 1 and Luke 3, among many others. Virtually all of them are lists of men's names. Legal descent, national and tribal identity, were always taken from the father, never from the mother. The sole exception to this is found in Ezra 2:61 and Nehemiah 7:63. It is very rare that a woman's name would be included at all unless she figured very prominently in Jewish history, and even then she would warrant only a passing reference. The fact that Moses traced this genealogy through the woman tells us that there will be something very different about the Messiah. Something that necessitates tracing his ancestry through his mother, not his father. Moses gives no explanation here, and none will be given for several centuries until the time of the prophet Isaiah, when he will prophesy, in chapter 7, the Messiah is to be born of a virgin and have no human father. Genesis 3:15 states that the Messiah will crush the head of the serpent, that is, Satan, and that is also located in Revelation 12:9, 12:15, and 22. In the process, Satan will manage to wound the heel of the Messiah, but will be unable to prevent his own destruction. The bruising of Messiah's heel took place at Jesus' crucifixion, painful but, in an eternal sense, not fatal. The crushing of the serpent's head began with Jesus' death and resurrection, a point made in Hebrews 2:14-18. Romans 16:20 sees the crushing of Satan's head as still future, and so his final destruction will not come until he is thrown into the lake of fire, as described in Revelation 20:10. As well as hinting at the virgin birth, this verse also emphasizes the humanity of the Messiah. Messiah, the Redeemer, will not be angelic nor simply divine, but will be a man. It also lays the groundwork for the Messiah to be the God-man. These ideas are further developed in subsequent prophecies. Genesis 4, 5, and 6 early echoes of the promise. These understandings about Genesis 3:15 come from our own historical perspective, with the light of full revelation we have from the Scriptures. But now, was this verse understood by those who had first heard it? There are 3 passages in the following chapters which offer some clues as to the thinking of 3 significant individuals concerning the meaning of Genesis 3:15. A study of these passages shows that through the virgin birth would not be understood until Isaiah. The expectation of a God-man Redeemer was understood. Genesis 4:1. A literal translation of the Hebrew text for Genesis 4:1 would read, "And the man knew Eve his wife. She conceived and bare Cain, and said, I have gotten a man, Jehovah." This is exactly the same sentence construction as in the next verse. Again, she bare his brother, Abel. Few Bible translators really understand what Eve is saying here, which is why out of English translations do not read as given above. Eve has clearly understood from God's words in Genesis 3:15 that the serpent will be defeated by a God-man. She obviously thinks that Cain is Jehovah. Her basic theology is correct. Messiah would be both man and God. Her mistake is in her application of that theology. She has assumed that Cain, her first child, was the promised God-man. That she quickly realized her mistake is evident at the birth of Cain's brother, whom she names Abel, meaning vanity. It is interesting to see how different scholars have dealt with this verse at different times. Most English translations read, I have gotten a man with the help of Jehovah. The words, with the help of, were added by the translators to avoid giving a reading which was unacceptable to them. But the Hebrew does literally read, I have gotten a man, Jehovah. This is actually the same construction as the Hebrew for the immediate preceding words, and she bare Cain. The common English translation is not based on the Hebrew text, but on the Greek Septuagint, which reads, through God. This was followed by the Latin Vulgate, which also reads, through God.